In the words of Tiffany, when I think about what could have been, makes me want to cry. I don't want to sound like a fanboy, he said, working on reviewing Voyager for the latest time over a 22-year period. But Ron Moore was one of the Star Trek writers of his era that really knew how to pull things together. A lot of Star Trek regulars had their strengths. Even Brannon Braga, whom I have maligned many times, still is well positioned inside of his wheelhouse and would have a much stronger legacy if he hadn't been spread too thin, creating so many mediocre stories to pull down his average. But Moore brought together a number of essential elements: an appreciation of the source material, a bravery to challenge the source material, the creative need to march right when the safe thing would have been to march left, and an insight into how characters are motivated. It was tragic, then, that after moving over to Voyager in the wake of DS9's conclusion, that he became so disheartened with the conditions for the other writers that he left so quickly. Because survival instinct shows us what we were missing. I'll even give you this right now. This episode gets a score of 9 out of 10. And this is his first attempt, and his only solo one, for the entire show. And it's not a major arc piece. It's not built upon the benefits of narrative context. It's a single episode character story. Grist for the mill, if you will. An episode to mark time until something major comes along. Again, I don't want to give the fanboy impression. Moore has hardly had a flawless career, after all. But I think that what is notable about his failures is that they happen when he took risks, and those risks failed. But when they succeeded, he was praised. I mean, even Evel Knievel fucked up sometimes. The possibility of what we could have had if Moore injected fresh blood and a new attitude into the show, based even upon what we see here, is disheartening, when we are instead stuck with things like Fairhaven, Spirit Folk, and Unimatrix Zero instead coming in Season 6. But okay, let's get this show started. We pick up with a Borg scout ship crashing on an alien planet, only to discover that one of those drones is 7 of 9. She quickly takes charge, telling the others to initiate various protocols and such that they agree with. Trapped in the wilderness isn't really a time to decide to go off script with your survival training. After the titles, and in the present, Janeway announces that they're at an alien station. Appropriate with more writing, after all. It's kind of like a Deep Space Nine in a way. It's a place where species can come together peacefully for trade and cultural exchange. And since this is still a Brannon Braga show, possibly to hump each other's brains out. Now, not to seem like a fanboy, actually to save time I'm going to take a page from Guilfoyle and language patch this with N2 Slaff for not to seem like a fanboy, so I don't have to keep saying not to seem like a fanboy. So anyway, N2 Slaff, but right away, we have a genuinely fresh sense of humor to this. Chakotay coming through with an alien racket of some kind offers Beltran a rare opportunity for physical comedy that he carries off well. And Tuvok's dry delivery of the ever-growing list of criminal behavior, and his acknowledgement that they are happy, despite this fact, allows Russ to show his effortlessness in keeping the character in character while imbuing him with dry Vulcan wit. Tim Russ is quite probably the only actor I would say that could hold a candle to Leonard Nimoy with the ability to make acting like a Vulcan seem effortless. It's not until you see other people trying that you realize how easy he makes it look. Now, quite obviously, I cannot credit all of this to Ron Moore, but it goes rather to the idea that when you introduce fresh ideas, you get fresh takes on things from all levels. The production is often going to reflect the leadership that's there. Seven and Naomi hang out for a while until a mysterious man comes along, offering to trade Borg synaptic relays from her old Unimatrix. It's time for the Delta Quadrant Antique Roadshow.
I'll take them. Captain Janeway will provide you with whatever monetary reimbursement you require.
Yeah, that's the kind of hard negotiating my wife tends to do. Whatever you think it's worth, and then throw an extra 20 on there for yourself. But fortunately for Voyager's accountant, money isn't the goal. He and his partner wanted Seven to get those relays and telepathically agree with each other to their next course of action. But we soon discover that these three individuals during the flashback as fellow Borg drones with Seven, that must have something to do with the present, as they debate how to go about doing what they're doing and the effect that it might have upon Seven if they do it. But soon enough, they decide to leap into action, creating a confusing security alert to keep Tuvok distracted while they slip in and screw with her while she's regenerating. The plan is foiled, though, by Seven waking up and Tuvok showing up to phaser the other three. Those are moments when it'd be really good if there was some more obvious targeting systems on those phasers. Stun blasts on everybody standing around you is not as comforting as it sounds, especially when you're a Borg standing in a crowd of Borg. I was honestly half expecting 3 beats after everyone else had gone down for Seven to then get shot by someone else who just felt like they needed to have the other shoe drop. Anyway, back in the flashback, the individuality of the drones, including Seven, is beginning to manifest. Earlier, when one of them mentioned that what they were doing was a violation of his deity's will, and now when they're all standing around a fire, recalling similar moments of their pre-Borg lives, serving as a sort of mental liquid plumber to allow the previous lives to start flowing past the clog, realizing that they are individuals who have been forced to be Borg against their will. The problem is that what Seven recalls isn't the glories of individuality, it's of being afraid of the dark. So she finally pulls rank and issues a command override. That's Borg for, "Get your shit together, people." In the present, the Doctor says that they've been freed from the collective for a few months, but that they're still somehow linked via their brains somehow. And that's what they're hoping to figure out, a way to end this link so they can stop sharing their thoughts with each other. They pinpoint the time of the flashback as being 8 years ago, or 6 years before Seven left the collective. They explain that ever since they came back, it's like having 3 voices in one ear, but a crowd in the other. So eventually they broke free of the collective. But they still can't break the link. They assumed that Seven would know, but she has no idea. How they all could have been around the same fire that night and not have any bit of memory except for a few fragmentary bits, that's a complete mystery, assuming, of course, you have never heard of alcohol. I have a mysterious gap in my memory. Anyone else experiencing any anomaly, any weird stuff? Yes, it would appear that somehow a stranger has infiltrated our camp and peed in my pants. You may be 7 of 9 to all of them, but you'll always be number 1 to me. We wind up with a brief aside where Entus laugh, but this is golden, as Janeway has to give a dressing down to a bruised and beaten Tom and Harry for getting into a fight with one of those sacred alien rackets. Terry Wendell, who normally directed TV commercials when he wasn't doing visual effects works, delivers particularly well. As an aside, I've noticed, and this probably seems stupid for me to even say, but notably good direction of commercials tends to produce visually interesting works once those directors get a chance to work on some dramatic pieces, because they've had experience in how to make a lot out of very little. Maybe I'm just, doing some kind of selective memory thing, but I can think of several directors who did great commercials and then went on to create really interesting looking dramatic works. Seven tells Janeway that she and the Triad, that trio of linked drones, could create a link to try to recover their lost memories, but there's a potential for problems if they try that. But still, she wants to go ahead. So with that, we return to the planet, where Seven leaves the group to address a mortally wounded drone, but she is unable to save him. Things go from dead to worse, as the beacon indicates that a Borg ship has located them, but that prompts the other three to resist their programming and want to hide to avoid reassimilation. Seven can't talk them out of that, so she waits, alone in the dark, with all the voices in her head now silent. Good for any of us, of course, especially with the one that tells us to start fires, but bad if you are a drone. So finally, it's Seven who decides to force them to comply by hunting them down and creating the neural link between them. Well, learning of this pisses them off to no end, but things are worse. The doctor says basically the situation is untenable now. There's only two choices. Remove the means that they are linked, which will kill them in weeks, maybe a month, or send them back to the Borg, where they can at least live out the rest of their lives, even if it would be as drones. Seven talks to Chakotay about this.
After I saw the drone die in the swamp, I panicked.
I began to envision my own death. Alone. Without even the sound of another drone to comfort me.
One thing that is a repeating motif for Seven of Nine in all her forms is facing being alone. As a human girl, she faced that when both of her parents were assimilated and she now had to deal with the Borg while helpless. As a former drone, Seven had to face being the sole person on Voyager while everyone was in stasis, while traveling through that nebula. And we see that, even as a drone, she found it terrifying having to confront being alone. Even being a cyborg with the power to defend herself against any aggressor was not enough. There are few things as unsettling as loneliness and silence. Chakotay asks whether returning to the collective is the right call, and Seven decides that merely surviving as drones isn't enough. They'll want to live as individuals, even if it is only for weeks or a month. The doctor is hesitant and makes the case that this is about Seven's guilt, but she argues that whatever guilt she has, it doesn't change the fact that simple survival isn't enough, that there has to be more. And it's clear afterwards that this is how they feel, talking of how they want to spend their final days in happiness.
My people don't believe in holding grudges.
But they're all assimilated, so sucker punch. Mariko will be staying on Voyager until she finally expires, but she cannot bring herself to forgive Seven for what happened. At least, though, Naomi is there, to bring Seven the comfort of her adopted family, and to close out this sterling episode of what could have been. Moore's script with Wendell's direction really allowed the performances to shine. This episode shows what Voyager could have been, a good use of the characters. This Janeway is the one I wanted to see when I first watched Caretaker. Tom and Harry are great in their lone scene. Beltran shows that he can deliver if you give him material worth caring about. Tuvok is in fine form, and the Doctor's subtle performance in many scenes shows the complexities that Picardo brings to the character. And let me reiterate, this isn't even that great of a story when you come down to it, but everything comes together so that a story of the week becomes something grand. Looking at what could have been, looking at what the talent of this show is capable of in just a run-of-the-mill episode, if they were properly utilized, makes you realize just how much potential was being squandered. The damnable thing about Voyager has always been that it could be so much more. This shows you it was there, just beneath the surface, and was prevented from fully embracing those possibilities. The same way that Manny Koto injected new life into Enterprise, we saw in Survival Instinct new life trying to press through the asphalt to finally birth a new golden age for the show. Embracing this fresh new approach, embracing what Voyager had the potential to be, it's not about Ron Moore specifically. It's about how a strong creative presence with fresh ideas was desperately needed for this show. But that voice that was needed to try to bring about that change departed, leaving behind only silence.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp, when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening. People writing songs that voices never share. And no one dared disturb the sound of silence. Fool said I, you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you. Take my arms that I might reach you. But my words, like silent raindrops, fell and echoed in the wells of silence. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. And the sign flashed out its warning, and the words that it was forming. And the sign said the words on the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, and whispered in the sound of silence.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
I'm afraid.